All right. Well, let's get into the details of your background, Jess, because obviously you've accomplished a lot throughout your career. You're the CMO at Starburst, which we're going to talk about Starburst and what you guys do. But let's talk about the foundational roots. So growing up, like where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child?
I grew up in northern New Hampshire, very small town. Yeah, I mean, we had maybe 600 people in the town that I grew up in. It was one of those areas where you end up merging 4 or 5 or 6 towns as you go through middle school into high school. So, but it was a nice area, lovely visually, lots of outdoor activity. I was heavily involved in sports. There wasn't a lot to do in northern New Hampshire, not a super active, like, because of the small population, you didn't have tons of sports activities to participate in that were like you would see in the bigger cities. So everybody was all about soccer. I played soccer, I played softball, I skied. So I just took advantage of the area I lived in and being able to be outside. I really, through that, developed, some competitive instincts, which have paid off throughout my career. I'm super competitive. People don't want to play board games with me anymore, but yeah, I mean, that's it. I had, nice family upbringing, good community, a little bit, I would say small, maybe a little bit narrow-minded, not very diverse. So as I moved on throughout my life, I sought expansion of people I'm surrounded with and bringing other diversity in different populations and, all of that experience together. So I've been able to work that in as I've gone.
So where'd you go to college and what'd you study at school?
So I went to Ithaca College. When I was coming through high school, I had no real idea of what I wanted to do with my life, but I had been building leadership and communication skills throughout sports, and different class leadership roles. And so I had a great advisor who said, you should look at communications programs. So that had me look at Ithaca College, where I ended up going, Emerson College, which I did get into, but when I went to visit the campus, I realized I had to get on a city bus in order to get from where I would live to school, and that just seemed very overwhelming to me. So I went to Ithaca, I looked at Syracuse, etc. But Ithaca was a great communications program. The major I chose was called Organizational Communication, Learning, and Design. And it's now called Integrated Marketing Communications, which is a much clearer title. But yeah, it was based on a research-based approach to developing clear communications, clear communication structures. I had a writing minor, so I spent a lot of time writing, which I still love to do. And I'd say it's probably my most favorite thing to do that I don't have time for. But yeah, so that's cool.
All right. So we're going to talk about your career kind of, now post-college, how you got started. And, based on the poll that we ran, so, 67% are trying to figure out how to work into a CMO role, 48% like career advice, and then 56% to hear your story. So everybody's in the right spot here.
It's very flattering because it's awkward to talk about yourself. And I find this generally awkward. So thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate it.
I'll share the results with everybody here. All right. Let's talk about your career. So you started out at a great research firm called Forrester. So how did you get involved with Forrester?
Yeah, so back to my major, a lot of the time I spent was doing primary research, learning research methods. And so when I left, I was looking for companies that might align with that. And so Forrester was a really natural fit. I didn't actually know anyone, but I was able to find out through my alumni network that there was one person at Forrester who had actually, I didn't know anybody in the Boston area, but one person through my alumni network I found out worked at Forrester. And so I met him. It was my first foray into the importance of networking. And I didn't know this guy. We just happened to have a shared college. And I took him to lunch. He was a very expensive place and I was 22 years old, but that's fine because it got me in the door. And yeah, and that's how I was able to get someone to refer me in, which I think is always critical for people to build their networks. And when you find an opportunity you want, don't just take the standard application path, or at least make that your last option. So that's how I got into Forrester, and I was a research associate, so it was a nice alignment with my degree. And it was actually, for me, just a lot of exposure to all sorts of different technology areas, and really ultimately built my desire to go in-house for a technology company versus just on the market research side.
Now, along the way, you spent some time in sales too, right? So, which I think is important to recognize that you've had this great career in marketing, but you've also, when you're dealing with sales teams, you have that empathy of having experience and on that side of the coin too.
Yeah, I refer to it as my 2 years of hard time. It's and I'll unpack that for a minute. So I had been on the market research side. I moved into product marketing at Forrester, and my last stop was sales for 2 years. So it was an account management role. So it wasn't net new business landing, but it was renewals and expansion. And the time that I was in that role was, I would say, it was 2017, 2018. This was a very bad time in the economy, especially to be selling market research services, which at the time, anybody could cancel their subscription and get their money back. It was a differentiator for Forrester, but you put a recession on top of that, and you have a lot of people saying, oh yeah, well, this was a nice to have, and so I'm going to cancel. And so it was a really tough time to be a seller at that company, any company really, but definitely that company. And I learned that that's not my forte. I mean, I like to be on uncovering who is the buyer, what is the value prop, what's the best way to communicate that. And I really fueled by that as a research project and as a trial and error and sort of a puzzle and figuring things out. But on the sales side, you have to be good at just repeating that message over and over and over again. And I continually wanted to tweak it because I had these natural instincts. I also did not love the rejection of sales. It's not my favorite. And people are very good at that, and so that's why they're better for that role. But ultimately, pretty early on, I knew it wasn't a natural alignment with my skills and what I was good at, but I did try to tough it out for a couple of years. And it has been invaluable to me as a marketer to know the value of having something done right now in the salesperson's hands is much more valuable than creating something perfect or being in a silo, and the value of collaboration and listening and making sure that sales feels like a first-class citizen that they are for marketing.
All right. So the next step, you did go in-house with Endeca, which is, one of these just great success stories in the Boston tech scene back in the day. Steve Papa and the company that was built, and where those people have gone off and done amazing things. The alumni network from Endeca is extraordinary. So where was the company at when you joined? Kind of, where, like, because obviously the company scaled and grew, but and what was your role, and talk about your experience there.
Yeah, well, first I had to transition from being in a market research company to proving that I deserved to work at a software company. So the way I did that was I cold outreach to Jason Purcell, who was high up in the product organization at that time. And he's the CEO of Salsify, that other local company here. They're doing a great job. But anyways, so I had to get in the door, and I didn't have someone I knew that worked there. So I again went for trying to build a connection, and that was the way I got in. The role that I ended up starting with was product marketing. So it went back to a little bit of my Forrester experience, but focused on competitive intelligence and partners as part of the product marketing function. And I was working for a guy called John Andrews, who other people might know. He ended up being the CEO of a company that was acquired by Nike. But John had a really successful time period at Endeca, and he's been a lifelong mentor to me as well. And I came in at 300 employees. I think we were no more than 450 by the time the acquisition happened 2.5 years later. But yeah, it was fascinating because I got to be part of a successful existing product, which at that point was the commerce engine. And then we realized there were these new use cases that clients were using the Endeca engine for that were much more akin to business intelligence. And so through listening to the customers and seeing what was going on, we ended up creating a startup within a startup to support a new line of products that would really go after what we called Agile BI at the time. And it was just fascinating experience. And I think that was a big part of the exit to Oracle ultimately.
And one of the things that I learned from you is, that product marketing side, and maybe this is because of your experience with Forrester, that you would come into a company that didn't have a defined category yet, and you'd almost create the market.
Yeah.
And therefore, when Forrester or Gartner would generate a report, you're already the market leader because you helped define the category. So, this isn't a marketing tips type of webinar, but I thought that was interesting how your point of view is, help create the market, and then you'll hopefully be the market leader because you helped build it.
There's a good book called Play Bigger. Lots of different opinions on that from different marketers or leaders of software companies, but it is all about the art of category creation, category design, and hypothetically you create a category and you emerge as the category king. And so there's economics that support this strategy too. anyways, I do view a lot of my work as in that vein. And Endeca was a really good example. So the startup within the startup was called Endeca Latitude. The original product was called Infront. And so with Latitude, this BI product, we realized we were being used for business intelligence, and yet there was this huge landscape of BI providers. And so we needed to understand why we were being used for that. And we realized it was at the advent of the big data era. And there was so much structured data inside the systems that we still have today, but so much unstructured content, social blogs, et cetera, ratings and reviews, because we had a heavy focus on commerce. And organizations were seeing this expansive data and content, but not in a position with their existing tools to take advantage of both. The existing tools only optimize for structured data. So what do we do with that? We worked with our customers to understand their use cases. We went heavy with analyst relations with Forrester at the time to invest in creating market research that supported that there's, the old BI tools don't serve today's use cases. And this new environment we call Agile BI. There was another provider, which everybody would know is a very successful company too. So we were basically kind of neck and neck on that category creation. We took that very quickly through ROI building use case work for Agile BI. And then a couple of months later, we had clients on stage. Apple was one of them, talking about their Agile BI implementation with Endeca. So that was my first taste of category creation. And we first of all had a necessity because we knew we were selling these use cases, but there wasn't an existing term or slant on the term to help support our differentiation. So we created that. There was an opening. We had differentiated tech. Obviously, that's important. And I look back at it as the fastest period that I've been involved in a category creation project, from naming the category to customers on stage. But it did make me a little bit addicted to that as an art, and it's hard work, but I think that everybody should learn a little bit about category strategy and categorization and its impact on the entire growth cycle for software companies.
All right, so
did I bore you to death with that? I could talk about
no, marketers marketers should listen, because that's obviously we get the press releases, Magic Quadrant, like how do you accelerate getting there? This would be one of the ways. Now the next step was Aqua, right? Another company that has just grown to massive proportions and a great success story. So when did you come into Aqua? Like, how did you land there? What was your role?
Well, I think this is, you made a nice opening statement about how I've taken advantage of young companies to get myself broader opportunities and grow maybe quicker than the average person. And so I was leaving Endeca. Oracle had acquired Endeca, and I had a choice. I could stay and I could take product marketing analyst number 4 as my job and just be part of this huge machine. Or I could try to be more aggressive with my career and take something a little bit riskier, but maybe a broader opportunity. So that appealed to me because I have always been very ambitious. I found out about Aqua. I did know someone there. So I got myself in the door, and they needed a leader of product marketing for their flagship product, Aqua Cloud. So luckily got through the interview process and landed that job. And for the first 2 years at Aqua, out of the 4 I was there, I was very much focused on that product and continuing to grow it. And we had different use cases we were serving. And so it was fascinating. The growth trajectory of Aqua was basically best in class. I mean, it's always been a strong company, but at that period that I was in it, it was rivaling Workday's growth rates. So it's just, I mean, I know everybody in the ecosystem knows about Aqua now, but that was a fascinating period for me of rapid growth. And through doing a good job with the cloud product marketing, I ended up getting an opportunity to run product marketing overall. And that's what I did for the last 2 years there. So that was my first leadership click. And I mean, I fundamentally believe working for young companies, working hard, that's one of the best ways to accelerate your career. It doesn't mean there aren't other paths to CMO, but a fast track path to CMO is working with startups and doing a good job and volunteering for things outside your charter.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, my background as a recruiter, and that's what I would share with people. It's like, how do I get to become a CMO someday? And I'll be like, well, you should work with great teams that are, high growth companies. And people would say, well, isn't that a risk? I'm going to join a startup. What if they don't make it? It's like, there's no risk if you're continuing to push your career forward and continuing to keep yourself more marketable. If there's a good economy or a bad economy, if your skills are marketable, you will be hireable. And that's how you push yourself forward. So that's why I used to squash the myth of startups. And, now it's, not, I don't think people have as much of a concern, but when I was doing the headhunting thing, that was definitely something that people would bring up. Now you had another individual that you worked with that was also like mentorship is part of your story. So
Yeah.
at Aqua, there was another one, right?
Man, I think there were so many. So Brian House hired me into the role, supported me, gave me tons of feedback, mentored me. And then ultimately, when he wanted to do something else within the organization, was the opportunity that I had to grow into. So Brian was one. Tom Wentworth was the CMO for the majority of the time that I was there. And he ended up being an awesome mentor and sponsor. When I think about Tom, I think about the time where Aqua was getting a little too big from an executive team standpoint to keep everybody at that table. And so there was this idea that, all right, I was on the executive team in the executive meeting. And then there was this moment where potentially both Tom and I in that forum was too much. It would have gone down just to C-levels. And, I understood that, but I was bummed at the idea of that because I was learning so much there. And, it was a great forum for me to grow in, and he fought for me to stay in that forum. And I think that's sponsorship. So he's been such a supporter. Tom Erickson, the CEO of Aqua, was also, formal and informal mentor and sponsored. Therese Betart, the CTO and co-founder of Drupal. I mean, I think that basically everybody's a little bit of a mentor. As long as I'm doing a great job and I'm providing value to people, everybody, I'm getting support all across the board. The most fundamental support moments were from sponsors who advocated that I was ready for that VP job, who advocated for me to stay at the exec team table. So yeah, lots of support from that ecosystem.
So what did you do next?
So after Aqua, I felt like I had done what I could do at the VP of product marketing for the scale that we were at. And so I started looking at overall marketing leadership positions and wanting to take that as my next step. And again, I was like, I'm going to have to go young, small companies again, because I've never been a head of marketing, and so I'm going to need to go to a small company where I can bring other skills to the table that are valuable. So I went to Drift, and so that was the end of 2015, I want to say. And I was only there for 6 months, and it was an awesome experience. There's no love lost between me and the co-founders. We have a great relationship, and I'm a huge supporter from the sidelines. It ended up being too early for me. 15 employees. I had all these skills. A lot of my skills were not useful at that stage. And there was a little bit of the searching for product market fit, which I didn't understand. You hear of it, but you don't understand it until you're experiencing it. And I think I was not built for that particular stage. Maybe if I run my own company, now I have a little bit of experience with it to draw from. But yeah, I came through it thinking, I've built up these particular skills. I know they're valuable in a variety of scenarios, and they're not necessarily not valuable here, but they're not as valuable as other skills I don't have, and I didn't have the time in my life to build those skills at that moment in time. So, but it was a great experience. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it also put me in the timing position to go after that next opportunity that I took with Miracle.
But what advice would you give to folks that are kind of going down this path of becoming a CMO and making sure that the stage of the company is the right fit? Because Drift was it's an amazing company, right? They've done really well, and you are so early on, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and it's not like they did anything wrong, you did anything wrong. It was, so what advice would you give to make sure that the company stage might be the right fit?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, I learned that lesson the hard way about where do I fit and where do my skills fit. I've always been someone who wants to commit long time. You can look at my background and mostly 3-4 years minimum. But in that scenario, it was 6 months. And so for me, going through that was difficult because, in my egomaniacal mind, there isn't a place I don't fit, but it's not about me. It was about my skills and what I can contribute, and not having a strong matchup with what the company needed at that time. So my advice is, first of all, it's not the end of the world to have an experience like that, and I think anybody in the tech ecosystem who has worked for startups has an experience like that. It's not a mar on you or your skills or what you're ultimately capable of. It is a lesson learned to look at yourself and figure out what are my superpowers? What am I really good at? What do I do uniquely well? And what types of companies need that? What stages, which categories, et cetera. And so again, I really would not change having that experience in my life, because it's like you have a bad boyfriend, and not that the drip was bad, but it didn't work out. But then what you can do well, or what you appreciate about the next, suitor and company in this case. And so I knew when I was looking at the Miracle opportunity that the skills they needed were things I do uniquely well, and that I would be more valued in that scenario, and I'd feel more useful. And it did work out great for 3.5 years.
And Miracle's another great company. Like, so
Yeah.
if people aren't familiar with Miracle, what does the company do? And then, because this was a different scenario where the company was headquartered outside the US.
Yeah, it's a fascinating company, founded in Paris. And so they built what's called it's a marketplace software platform. So we all shop on Amazon, so that gives you the right context. When you go to Amazon, you can find anything you want. And most of those products, over half of the products, are provided by not Amazon. Amazon doesn't own them. They're not in their warehouse. They're provided by what are called third-party sellers. So like any mom and pop shop can list products on Amazon as a third-party seller. You as the consumer don't really care or get it. You just want what you want. And so therefore, in this model, they have a huge assortment. And then you go and you buy, and whoever ships whatever you bought to you. So this marketplace model thrives on having a big ecosystem of third-party sellers, which bring more products, which bring more customers, and it's this cool virtuous cycle of growth. When Miracle started, really only Amazon was benefiting from that. It was Amazon kicking everybody's ass, creating pricing pressure on retailers like crazy, and really upending the retail market, to be honest. So Miracle had this platform which would allow anyone else, retailers, manufacturers, distributors, to have a better online presence and offer more goods through that same third-party seller model. So it was kind of an order management, retail commerce platform, but specifically built for online marketplaces. Started in France because there was basically a faster uptick of marketplace adoption in Europe than there was in the US outside of Amazon. So Adrian and Philippe, the co-founders, created Miracle. And then when I entered, it was because they had done really well in France and some of the other European countries, but they needed to expand in the US. So I joined as the global head of marketing based in Boston, but for a French company effectively at that point in time. It was a fascinating experience, really good switching of my purview and point of view, because I'd only worked for American companies who expanded overseas. And you always sort of treat those countries as this satellite, and they get the scraps, And in this scenario, even though I was the global head of marketing, I was in the region that got this, that reverse approach. So it was really good for me to feel that and learn that, so that I can be more empathetic and take care of other, as we grow at Starburst, of our new regions. That I know Matt Browning, my head of European marketing, is on the call. So I'm not saying this just for him, but I'm hypersensitive to European expansion team members feeling othered or unsupported, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen. And I thank the Miracle experience for giving me that perspective.
So talk about your experience there as far as, the marketing and how you built a, presence here in the US and kind of leading marketing for the company.
It was fascinating. So they had one sort of it was actually in Canada, Best Buy Canada, but one big brand they had landed when I started. And it became really important to create an identity that Miracle was not a French software company, because the growth in America was reliant on them feeling they had local support, they had people they could talk to, they understood, and that there were local customers that they could be part of a community for. So that was a real uphill battle, because we had one brand, but luckily they were very happy and they were making a lot of money. And so we were able to work out a nice marketing relationship with Best Buy Canada, which is still in effect today. And that sort of paved the way to getting branding and awareness off the ground here. But that was a long road, and adjacent to customer storytelling was that same category creation journey, because there was no wave or magic quadrant for marketplace platforms. So a lot of our time and a lot of my skills have been in, from the beginning of my career working for an analyst firm, but then always being on the marketing side of the technology company side of things. I've always spent a lot of time and energy on analyst relations, and I seemingly always work for companies that have a bit of a category challenge, and that's good for me because I have skills there. and it's always a fun thing to work on. So we spent a lot of time with Gartner, and I don't know if they're at Magic Quadrant yet, because this is a 3 to 4 year journey. There is no category. You start to evangelize it. More competitors come online. Gartner decides, all right, we're going to do a market guide. And then maybe they refine it the next year. If you're lucky, the third year it's a Magic Quadrant, but often it's 4. But anyways, I worked on that a lot throughout the journey at Miracle. I worked on building the global brand versus, a European startup brand, and making sure that we could grow successfully in the US and Latin America, et cetera, APJ too.
All right, so let's talk about your current company, Starburst, which, if everyone noticed, I'm wearing the hoodie today. Usually I wouldn't be
I
wearing
love
a hoodie
it.
in May, but
Yeah.
I did get some swag from a while back, and this is a nice hoodie. It fits well, so
You,
I had
you
to wear it
really
today.
did. You did some social sharing for our Series B announcement. Do I remember that correctly?
That is correct. This is
Thank
it.
you.
Yes, yes, very true, very
Yeah.
true. Um, so talk about, like, how did you end up at Starburst, and what the company does? Because a lot has happened since you joined, and you recently announced new funding, another round that put
Mhm.
the company at unicorn status. So a lot has happened since you joined. So I definitely want to, spend a lot of
Yeah.
time unpacking Starburst.
There's a lot to talk about here. So I'll start with how I came into the role. So I was at Miracle. I was super happy. I loved my team. I felt good, but I also felt like I was sort of peaking a little bit on what I could do there in the environment. Where I had sort of done what I had done, and I built a really strong team of secondary leaders. And I'm very addicted to the build phase. So it was getting towards, manage, maintain, improve, optimize from a stage perspective. And I just had the itch for, maybe I want to go and build again, and I had strong enough leaders in place that I felt like I could exit and Miracle would be fine. And I think that's really important too. And that's something that employers value when you think about your exit path and making sure companies are okay. But that's an aside. But I wasn't quite ready to be in the market yet, but I was just starting to think about it. And actually, Starburst is fascinating because Tom Wentworth, actually, one of my former, current mentors, sponsors, had interviewed for this particular job first, and he's like a little bit too big. He didn't quite want to go back, start from the ground up, and be marketer number 1 again. But he did tell me, hey, you should really look at Starburst. It's a really cool opportunity. If I wanted to go from the ground up again, this is absolutely the opportunity I would take. And so he said that, but I still wasn't ready. Justin was reaching out to me on LinkedIn, by the way. He's our CEO, Justin Borgman, and he is the number 1 recruiter at the company. But I was ignoring him, and Tom was saying this, and I was just doing my job with my heads down. And then I got a text, a very aggressive text one day, and it was from Tim Bertrand, the former head of sales of Aqua, and Justin was on the group text, and he said, "You have to talk to Justin." And of course, anything my network asks me to do, I will respond, because I think the network is everything. So that's how I actually got on the phone with Justin. And then kind of, I would say very much from that initial conversation, I was hooked, because I found him to be a great person, humble, super smart, really strong vision. And the way he talked about the company trajectory so far, the competitive landscape, all the things that I would question. I ended up feeling like, yeah, I'd be insane not to take a serious look at this opportunity. So I went from ignoring him to, how do I get this job in
Right.
no time? But so that's how I got in. It was, again, everything in my career has been based on having done a good job, building a strong network, and then the network helping me pay attention to the right things or introduce me when I needed.
Well, I think you brought up another great point. Like, the founder CEO should be, if not the best recruiter in the company, one of the best recruiters, because it's all about the team. And
Yeah.
if the CEO founder is not recruiting the best team, the company's not going to have the same level of success. So he obviously proved, as far as, landing someone like yourself, that was a priority. And obviously he made it to the point where you were like, I need to join this company. This is amazing. So that's such an important part, that, when you're deciding on companies, kind of look at the team and kind of look at who's kind of running the show as far as recruiting at all levels. So, all right. So where's the company today? What does Starburst do? Like, and how have you shaped your marketing department, along the way?
Yeah. So I'll keep it super high level on what Starburst does. It's an analytics technology. It's based on helping people who have to run really fast queries or questions of data. It's called ad hoc or interactive. So, and people are looking to ask questions of very large data sets that are located all over the place, that are distributed. And so we all live in a world, like if you're in marketing right now, you're using 10 different tools. And that's just one small example. But companies are struggling with getting the right level of access to data to answer their questions quickly enough so they can drive the business. And Starburst has a unique technology that really unlocks data across different systems so people get fast access to the information they need. So it really solves a key challenge of companies wanting to be more data driven, but not having fast, easy access to the data. So we solve that. And it is a wildly successful company, and it's part of why I really wanted the job once I understood what was going on here. So Starburst was founded in 2017, but the story goes back a little further, if you'll indulge me. And right now I'm recruiting. So, anybody on this call for a role, I am recruiting you. I'll talk more about the open roles at the end. But 2017 was the founding date, but the founders go back 2 companies ago. They started a company called Adapt, another tech company, sort of on the same mission, but focused on one particular system called Hadoop, which is like at the advent of the big data era, everybody was pouring their data in this really cheap to store it place, but it was hard to access and analyze the information. So Adapt was solving for that. Adapt was acquired by Teradata, a really big database company. And they continued on their journey of working with open source technologies, which do this. And so at that point, they found this technology called Presto, created out of Facebook to manage big data analytics at scale. And they got involved and they started contributing back to that project, and they created at Teradata a commercial support subscription. So anybody who was using Presto at that time, you could get support from experts at Teradata. And then Teradata decided that wasn't their bag. Their focus was not going to be on open source. So the team ended up departing, and they worked it out in a way that at the beginning of Starburst, they could pull over all those support contracts. So Comcast, one of the biggest customers we talk about all the time today, is one of those original Teradata clients. And that means Starburst started with product market fit, revenue, and customers from day one back in 2017. So that's it's a very unique jumping off point. And it put them in a position to bootstrap and not take external VC dollars for quite some time while they figured out, is the market opportunity there? What do people actually want and need in the product that we'll build? And start building that. And it was a lean team of 10 or 12 people for that first 18 months. And then they were having success selling. So that was a good sign. They started to hire a couple more people, and it became clear it was time for growth. So that's when they raised their Series A in November of 2019. I came in that time period. So I started in January 2020 as the first marketer. And we have just, I hate using like the rocket launch, but I don't really know what else to do. All the buzzwords, hypergrowth, hyperscale, rocket ship. We've gone from Series A to Series B to Series C, and we have been very successful in that process, growing the business, building our teams. We've gone from 50 when I started to 270 employees, I think, in this time period. We could talk about that for days. I know you're going to do a separate session with Ashley, but maybe you should ask her about what it's like to go through this remote life period, growing and adding that many people to the team. Not easy, and we're trying to do the best, but hopefully that paints a picture of what we do, the founding story, and answer some of your questions.
And as you're building out your team, who's your first hire, right? You're doing everything. I assume you were probably leveraging an external PR firm. You probably had different levers to get things done back at that earlier stage, but as you started to grow, you had to build your own internal marketing function. So how did that shape over time?
Yeah, I will say there were like 0 levers when I started, which is the beautiful part of the Starburst story is everything I said. The sort of challenging / opportunity for me side of the story is there was not really any marketing for the first 2 years. So when I started, I think there had been a couple of events, community events for Presto, which is now called Trino. And maybe some ad hoc PR activity, but nobody was driving from a marketing standpoint. Here's our strategy, here's our messaging platform, here's our programs, here's the systems we'll use. It just didn't exist. So when I started in January, I had a pretty healthy budget for a Series A company and 4 headcount. And I had to, everything needed to be built from scratch. There was a good contractor, a marketing contractor, who was supportive in that process. And anyways, we started to get off the ground a little bit. And my first hire was for an event marketer, which is really funny because Mandy Darnell, who came from Rapid7, Justin recruited her, top recruiter. And we were planning an event-centric business in 2020. That was going to be one of the core aspects of how we would build brand awareness and generate demand. And of course, we all hit the pandemic. Mandy, I think, was our first hire who onboarded completely remote. I think first person in the company to be hired and not show up at the office on day one. And she runs events. She ran amazing global events for Rapid7. And so she comes here and like, we're staring down this pandemic thing, not really knowing what's going to happen. And pretty soon we realize we're not going back to events physically in anytime soon. So fascinating as with her being the first hire. I'm proud of her for coming and taking the risk. And she had to refactor how she worked. She worked on digital events. She pitched in on ABM. I mean, she figured it out. But that's an interesting first hire at the time that we were at, and she's done an amazing job. She's been promoted already. So that she started in March 2020. So here we are, just a little over a year later. And then demand gen, and then product marketing, and then we hit our Series B, and we went to ops and content marketing and leveling up on the demand gen leadership side. We started growing in Europe. Matt, who's attending, started in January of this year. And we've been building out partner marketing. We've been building out solution marketing. We're investing more in ABM. So we've really been growing across the board since then. And so with me as the first hire in January 2020, we now have 16 full-time marketers, and we'll get up to 21 or 22 by the end of the year.
Wow, that's awesome.
The sales have gone from 20 to 100. So they're trying to keep pace. It's very fast.
What does your schedule look like? Like, what's a week in the life look like for a CMO? I know it's insane revolving, just different things happening constantly. So, but if you had to, put things in buckets, like how does, a week look like for you?
Yeah, I would say probably 30% of my time is communication and alignment with other functions, whether that's time that I'm in. We have exec team, obviously, sessions. We also have, there's a weekly sales meeting. We have weekly product marketing and management meetings. So I spend a lot of my time basically trying to keep the train on the tracks. Are we doing the right things? Do we know who's on first? And how are we working through a variety of collaborative cross-functional projects? So I spend a lot of my time on that. And coming up through product marketing as a path to being a CMO, I think helps you focus time there. It helps you, I spend a lot of time on that. Because when you're a product marketer, you're always running product launches and you're always getting people to do things on a timetable who don't work for you. So you have to get really good at building relationships and effectively getting people to figure out how to get aligned and work against a project plan. And so you bring that into the overall marketing leadership position, and I'm still working on getting people aligned and getting people aligned and landing the plane on decisions and working on execution and making sure that we don't fall out or we don't have redundant efforts and things like that. So a lot of my time goes there. I spend a lot of time thinking about content strategy and thought leadership and brand building, because that's sort of my retained individual contributor work at this point. Over time, I probably won't lean in so heavily on any one topic, but I've been hiring for my gap, which is demand gen, and bringing people on board who know more about the function, more about the funnel, more about marketing and sales ops and partnership there. And I think you have to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses on your path to product, on your path to CMO. Like, what are you great at and what will you need to hire for? And so I'm great at product marketing and thought leadership. I need to hire for demand gen. So anyways, I've been building the team around closing my gaps, and then a lot of my time goes into those things that I'm good at. And over time, I will have too much of an administrative schedule and budget management, people management workload to do well at anything from an individual contributor standpoint. And at that point, we'll hire someone, individuals to run all those functions.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So has there been like a moment when you were like, reflecting on your career, like, what do you think were the decisions that you made that helped you get to where you are today? Like, whether it was wow, I took the risk and that worked out, or I was smart, or even maybe things like, wow, I messed up then, but I nailed it the next time.
Yeah. So I think so my spirit of volunteerism is something that has helped me because I was able to stand out through doing a good job, but also lending value beyond my charter. And that always gets noticed, I think, by senior leadership. You can easily see the people who are doing a great job and they're doing extras. So I've always had sort of a spirit of volunteerism. And I think that some of it's driven by a genuine desire to help. And some of it's driven by my drive and wanting to move up and seeing extras as opportunities for me to stand out and be visible, especially to senior leadership. So I think, maybe without knowing it, my spirit of volunteerism gave me some good visibility opportunities early in my career. And then I realized what was going on and that was helping me get more time, attention, or mind share from senior leaders. And then I started to lean into it even more and try and pick off more strategic projects for either my leader or other leaders where I thought I could lend some value. And be more intentional about how I was volunteering my time. I turned it into strategic volunteerism because I realized there was a point in time when just like volunteering to help for everything is going to cost you on your core job, and not everything gets you those visibility opportunities. So I think I screwed up a few times, spending too much time on extras and not enough time on core job, both because I was trying to help, but also because I was looking for more visibility opportunities. So that was a lesson learned for me, that it is a vehicle to moving up and getting visibility, but you have to use it wisely or else it can be counterproductive. So I've taken a few performance management hits on like, you're doing too much of that, you're not focused enough on this. And that's one of the things I learned from. But yeah, and I think generally working my ass off while continually seeking other ways to help / visibility opportunities has been the recipe for me to move up quickly.
Well, I listened to Tom Wentworth has a podcast and you were a
Yeah.
guest on his show, and it was great. Because you talked about something that's very important, and it's how do we foster more women or diverse talent into leadership roles? And the topic that you were discussing was she's not strategic. So a bias that a woman is not strategic enough to be in the boardroom discussion or executive. Yeah, he was talking about you fought to get into these executive meetings, and he was asking like, why were you fighting? Like he knew he was just asking for the podcast, which I think this is important for people to understand of and I ask these questions because I have 2 teenage girls, and like I hope these biases are going away because they are visible now and people are aware that these exist. But so what advice would you give to others around building into that leadership role?
Yeah, I think you have to think about it from 2 different ways, because if you're in a position of leadership, you have a responsibility to try and figure out if you're acting with a bias towards anyone, whether it's a woman or someone who's not a woman, but maybe is in an underrepresented minority group. It's a tough topic to discuss because not, if we just say focus on women for a second, not all women are interested in being more strategic or interested in growing their careers. But many are, and many don't vocalize that. And in there doing a great job, they're just heads down, focused on doing operational activities and executing. And they're not taking the luxury of pulling their head up and trying to be a little bit more strategic. So from the leader perspective, you have to check your bias, because the reason I wrote that was I had seen a pattern over probably the 5 years of my career leading up to that, since I had been a leader. In those rooms where promotions are being discussed or people are being assessed, or you're working on a high potential program or your 9-box, you start to hear patterns. The pattern I was seeing was women who were potentially up for a promotion, who were, somewhere on the right, definitely high potential, definitely recognized for their excellence in executing. But when that VP title or the next promotion click was being discussed, there was this sort of common term, she's not strategic, and what people were saying was, this woman is more focused on execution, and I haven't seen her potential on the strategy side, but it was coming across as a pure judgment of potential. And I think that people were not able to, I think, those who are in charge, which is largely men, which being honest, were using, a perspective of a woman's performance to date as a judgment on their potential, which is really, really not true. And in some cases, it was an unfair judgment too, because if you break apart what makes you strategic, a lot of the women I've seen who were not getting those clicks, they were exhibiting those things. So I took the opportunity to give it a name and call it out as a bias-based issue, and then hopefully prescribe both for leaders how they can sort of reset themselves when they're assessing women, and then for women also a little bit of a pragmatic path on how can you combat this if you're struggling with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's great feedback. I mean, it's definitely something that is a lot more visible now, luckily, and hopefully companies are aware of it and addressing it. All right, so I think it makes sense to open up kind of the Q&A just to have, audience, and we've got a bunch of questions already. So how do you know when you're ready to take the next step in your career? So someone asked, how many years would you say is good to stay within a position or a company until you advance into the next level? So how do you know when you're ready to take that next step?
It's a complicated question because every company will move at a different growth pace. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possible that inside 6 months, if you've killed it and there's a new opportunity, that you shouldn't feel comfortable putting your hat in the ring. Is that right? But generally, just seeing this from the leadership perspective, I think that if you're young and you're working hard and you're coming up, you might be antsy about, all right, my 1-year anniversary is coming up. I want a promotion, or I want a raise, or I'm ready for the next thing. I think it's less about the timing and more about an open dialogue with your direct manager about what your goals are, what their expectations are of you, and what do they see for your path or your opportunities. And I think this is less about there being a secret timing behind all of this, or an ideal timing even, and more about knowing what you want, communicating that to your manager, and then being willing to work with them on what the opportunities are. So if you go to your manager and say, my ultimate goal is to be the CMO. Here I am as a marketing specialist today. How do I get there? I think maybe a promotion within a year is a good idea. You have to be willing to work with your manager's response to that, which is maybe, yeah, that works for me here. Let's do a plan for the next 12 months on what you need to do to get promoted. And then you're aligned, and then you just work on it. You don't constantly push. You just, you get aligned on what you want, what your manager expects to see, and then you work towards that, So I think that's the pragmatic thing to think about versus there being a number or days or whatever, how long you should wait to move into the next role. And, don't be afraid to go for new opportunities within the company, even if you haven't been there long. Everything's possible, and that's what I love about startups, actually. But yeah, I don't think there's a magic number. I don't think that everybody should expect or feel entitled to promotions and raises at a year. I think that if you have clear communication with your manager about where you want to go, what they expect from you, those things should fall in line in a way that works for you and is not frustrating and is clear.
Another good question that touches upon something that you've already talked about a little bit is so outside of the standard marketing job description, what do you consider those high reward initiatives that you should try to participate in that would help you become more strategic and take that next step as being thought of as an executive?
Yeah. Always attached to the business goals. So for instance, revenue growth is always going to be a goal for a business that you're working at. So what are the ideas that are growth centric that you have something that's creative, or somebody's running a project and you can lend yourself to? So how can you help the company grow revenue and land new customers and expand existing relationships? That's always going to be a winner. The other thing that's going to be a winner is, do you have ideas on how to improve the customer experience? So maybe you're not in customer success and you're in marketing, but you think you could create a great nurture program to help customers more effectively use the technology. Be thinking about, what are the things that you can do, whether it's in your charter, related to your charter, but hits one of those strategic levers. Those are the visibility opportunities. So anything that drives revenue, anything that improves customer experience, and then lastly, anything that saves cost. So, if I'm really simplifying it, think about those 3 things. Look around yourself at what is the strategy of the company, what are the projects that are running, how can you get involved in a way that feels authentic to you and your skills will be useful. Those are the areas to step out on, in my opinion.
Very cool. We have a Forrester alum chiming in.
Oh, cool.
So what's the number one thing that you took from your time and experience as a product marketer to help you in your role as a CMO?
So I think that, typically there's two general paths to CMO, and obviously there's others, but you can come up through the demand gen engine side, or you can come up through the product marketing and strategy side. And so I have come up through that side, and I think that has lent itself to marketing being a driver of alignment with the executive team and strategy. I think that the thing that I was good at with the product marketing roles I had was, what is our go-to-market strategy? And product marketing always holds that responsibility for being the quarterback of who is the target audience, what is our value proposition, and how do we communicate that? So those skills that I built up as a head of product marketing and refined over time really are invaluable, because every company, if you're working for tech companies, they're always going to be looking at the go-to-market strategy, the personas, the use cases. This will always be refining. And if you're good at that, that's going to give you a differentiated seat or position as a CMO. You will have to hire for demand gen. You'll have to close those gaps that you don't come in with. But my strengths have always been on the strategy side, and I guess on the communication side too.
Now, you've been fortunate to have some great mentors, founders, executives that have all been part of these teams that have gone off to do great things. But do you have any advice if maybe you're not in that scenario where maybe it's more of a toxic environment? The leader is not mentoring you, or just kind of the inverse of what you experienced along the way. Like, how should someone deal with that?
Yep. Okay. So I mean, a lot of perspectives on that. I know a lot of people who have been in negative scenarios where they don't feel supported by their manager, or they think the company is toxic, whatever it is. I mean, like, my first piece of advice is try to figure it out, because you don't want to hop around in your career if you don't have to. And if there is a way to stay and move up and get out of the toxic environment and get to a new manager, that's probably going to be better for you in the long run than, I don't like it here, this is toxic, I'm out. So I would advocate for try and figure it out. Now, how to try and figure it out. So I think about the difference between mentors and sponsors, and mentors are basically helping you help yourself, and sponsors are actually able to open doors for you. So sponsors have more power. Now, you can get mentorship from anyone, peers, people below you, people above you, but that sponsorship lever is critical to getting, not only advancement, but out of the things that are not working for you. The way I think to get sponsorship is to first offer value. And so I mentioned, find ways to help drive revenue, improve customer satisfaction, or reduce costs. What is the impact you can bring? What are the individuals who seem to be in charge of those initiatives? How do you network your way to them? Bring them ideas, tell them you're willing to lend extra cycles above and beyond your core job. So basically, find people who are powerful that ideally are clearly sponsoring other people, and reach out to them and offer value. Don't offer to take their time and say, I want to learn from you. Say, I want to help you. I think I can do this. Here's what I think I could do to help you. Do you want this? Does this align with you? And then through offering your support of them, you should in return receive benefits of mentorship and sponsorship. But I don't think the way to go about it is to say, hey, would you be my mentor? Or hey, would you be my sponsor? Personally, offering value to people, building relationships with them, and supporting them will ingratiate them to you and hopefully open those doors.
Yeah. So it should just like organically happen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about your team and hiring. Someone actually asked the question, like, are you open to hiring people working remote?
Yeah, we are. Can I share a screen on this webinar, Keith, or do you have to? I want to pull my open roles up. Yes, we're open to remote. A lot of the roles. Let's see. No, that's okay. You can go start. Oh, perfect. Is
it working? Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Awesome. Right. So we have, these are the open roles. Thank you so much, Keith. We've got a nice listing on VentureFizz, but we are open to remote. I think that we don't consistently list if these jobs are remote or not, but basically we're fully open to remote right now. Some jobs need to be in the Americas. There's one open role in Europe right now. So if anybody's interested in that, we would love some more applicants. But we're hiring across the board. So digital marketing, content marketing, partner marketing, product marketing, technical content. So there's a lot that we're looking for right now. And we're going to be growing very quickly. So kind of don't feel afraid to apply to these roles or reach out to me directly, or just keep your eye on things that might be coming out in our new roles too. It's a super exciting team. I mean, just to sell this team, we have some extreme talent. A lot of it comes from our market or other markets, but everyone is functionally A+, and good people, which is always the mixture I strive for, is good, humble people who are in it to win it, have good attitudes, are flexible, agile, willing to help others and step outside a role, but also bring serious experience to the table that's going to help us move quickly.
And just to put a spotlight, VP of product marketing, I mean, all the jobs sound amazing, but that one's definitely sounds like a great opportunity to kind of follow in your footsteps of your career.
Yeah, you could not have more visibility in this role. I'm coming from a 2-day exec team offsite, and a lot of what we're focused on is that go-to-market motion and use cases, personas, et cetera, and competition and differentiation. And these are all topics that the VP of product marketing gets to own, and they're meaty, fun, strategic topics. There's an awesome team in place to build upon and grow. So it's going to be a killer job. We are specifically looking for people who have run product marketing already, who have domain expertise. So it's kind of going after a bit of a refined pool. But if you know of anyone who knows the big data and analytics space and has been a VP of product marketing in the past, or even previous CMOs who are interested in going back to their core strength, which I swear to God is my next job, because I've always loved it. Yes, if you know anyone, I would love referrals for that. It's a really important job for us right now.
Very, very cool. Well, Jess, we're at 1 o'clock, so that flew by. Thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your career path, all the great advice. And obviously there's a ton of opportunities at Starburst. So go check out their company page on VentureFizz. I showed you it with the screen share there, but you can just go to venturefizz.com/Starburst and you'll see all the job listings there. Jess, thanks again for taking the time. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm super flattered, and please apply to our open roles.